Okay, so today I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the big things that I want from Saw 9 or whatever they end up calling this next movie, the Chris Rock produced reimagining, reboot, spin-off, whatever they're going to end up doing with the series coming in October of 2020. So with that being said, let's jump right into it.
Hey YouTubers, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload.
Okay, so first and foremost, and I feel like this wouldn't be the thing that a lot of people would jump on when it comes to this revamp or this reboot. A lot of people would be focusing on characters and serialization of the story continuing to open bell and just everything related to what they know and love about the franchise. But I'm going to kind of subvert expectations here by talking about going back to bare essential basics. And if I have one big criticism for the franchise, at least on this point, is that doesn't seem to be what we're getting with this next film. They're bringing back Darren Lynn Bousman, and even though it's supposed to be a spinoff, a reimagining, something that's going to be a horror event for every movie fan, not only of this franchise, but just horror in general, I'm not really sure, and from what we've heard and seen thus far, I really don't think that this is going to be how they approach it. See, what I mean here is when it comes to the Saw franchise, a lot of people talk about the very first film. It was better than I anticipated. It's not anything that anyone told me it was going to be, not torture porn, more psychological. It's kind of horrifying what these people had to do to themselves in order to survive their games. And at the same time, would I have the guts or the stomach to even do that to myself in order to get out of these traps? But when you boil it down, it was just two guys sitting in a bathroom and having a conversation about the implications of what they've been asked to do and whether or not they're going to do it. That is a heavy-hitting story, and I really feel like if there's anything that the Saw franchise can do or should do in the future, if it really wants to go back to that, it needs to just focus on characters, it needs to focus on conversations, and not try to push gore and blood and guts down our throats in order to just make it seem like, oh, isn't this scary? Aren't you entertained? Look how fast everything is moving. And don't get me wrong here, I love Darren Lynn Bousman. I feel like even though James Wan and Leigh Whannell created this franchise, these characters created a world that we were going to live in for multiple different films and a mythology, Saw 2 is what really crafted the look and narrative structure of every single Saw film after it. That's why it's one of the more entertaining ones and why it holds up to this day. Probably the most thing that all of us remember about the Saw franchise, even though we like one, a lot of people say they like one. When you think of Saw, you think of Darren Lynn Bousman's work. That's not where it started. And even though 2 and 3 did try, at least to some degree, to have characters in a room talking about the implications of things that they've been asked to do, by the 4th film, we were completely away from that. And it's one of the biggest problems that I had with Jigsaw, even though I did appreciate that movie. Jigsaw tried to modernize and revamp the Saw franchise that happened after Saw 4. It didn't try to go back to Saw 1. It tried to take what Darren Lynn Bousman had created, at least visually, and make it for a modern day horror movie. That's never going to really appeal to anyone. And if you want to make this movie something fans can get excited for, I feel like bringing it back down to basics, having it in a 1 location setting, or maybe just 2 locations or whatever they're going to do, boil it down and have a character-focused narrative that is intrinsically horrifying with everything that they've been asked to do and not what we're seeing. That's what made the first one special, and I feel like that is what would make this next film that much more special. Now, with that one out of the way, I just want to talk briefly about continuity. Continuing the continuity that has been built over the course of these 8 films. If you're not a fan of the Saw franchise, then first of all, what are you doing here? Why have you watched this far? And what are you expecting? Seriously, go down to the comment section and tell me what you're expecting from this movie. Is it anything that I've talked about here? Seriously, is there anything that I've talked about here or will talk about later on in this list that you think would work, that would make you excited to see this movie out of everything that you know about the Saw franchise or have seen or don't really respect or just whatever? But for the most part, I feel like the fans of this franchise, if nothing else, want the story to continue. They want to see what's happened next. They want to dive even further into John Kramer, who he is, where Billy really came from, even though he was just a toy that he made for Gideon and it kind of evolved into what the Billy puppet was, and everything related to the tricycle, the pig mask. And I know a lot of this has been explained in the movies, or at least kind of alluded to their broader meaning. Even Jigsaw, for all of its haters, had a lot of broad strokes meaning in the background and stuff being played out that helped explain who John's character was and how he's grown in the continuity of the franchise. It's one of the reasons I really appreciate that movie, and I feel like it deserves more love than it gets. If this movie, this next one, uproots everything, if it completely wipes out Saw 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then right off the bat, not just me, but I feel like a lot of people who are listening to this right now, a lot of people who are excited about the new Saw film are going to look at it almost instinctively as this no longer fits in my idea of what Saw should be. The series needs to be interconnected. It needs to have multiple layers. It needs to mess around with timelines and show you what was happening in a time and an area with characters that we either knew or didn't know at that time, what they were doing, what they were thinking, and how they were plotting against each other. I mean, it's really kind of a crazy woven story that's more of a Game of Thrones type of narrative than most any other horror movie franchise. And I feel like just throwing all of that away would lose part of the heart and soul of what the Saw franchise is. And I just really hope they don't do it. That's why I'm putting it so, close to the beginning of this list, because I feel like so many people would agree with this and one of the things that everybody wants. But of course, if you disagree, tell me in the comment section below. And if you had to get rid of a certain scope of movies, what would it be and how would you kind of reorganize it? Like if they were going to do a Halloween 2018 thing and just get rid of everything besides the first film, how do you go on from there? I mean, it has been, at least at that point, it's going to be like 16 years from the first film, or it's going to be 15 years from the second film, or, 14 years from the third film, and so on. You know what? Before I move on, I just want to say, I think that getting rid of Jigsaw it would hurt, but I would feel less bad about it than getting rid of almost every film past 3, or even every film past 2, or every film past the first film. Every film that you get rid of in this timeline is going to hurt, but as long as they don't just completely clear shop and try to reinvent it from the first movie as a main sequel to that and break continuity that's been building up over the course of the last, 15 years, that's going to be a little bit harsh for me, and I'm not sure I really want it. The next thing I want to talk about is the return of a major character that's not Tobin Bell. And I know a lot of people have been throwing out their suggestions left and right. They want Dr. Gordon back. They want Hoffman back. They want Adam back. They want Amanda back. They want just every character possibly related to the main storyline. But unless this movie is just a complete nostalgia sequel, bringing back all of the main elements that ever made any of the Saw films even remotely good, then maybe we need to boil it down and just bring back one right person to play one pivotal role. Think about when they brought back Shawnee Smith in order to play the Amanda role in Saw 6. That worked gangbusters because at least at that point, we hadn't seen her for multiple movies. They brought her back for a very pivotal role within that movie. They helped establish her character, and at least as far as we knew at that time, allowed that character to come full circle. We understood her motivation and what she was going through in the last part of Saw 3. And that really opened the door for so many discussions, a lot of which we've had on this channel in multiple different videos, with multiple different opinions about her relationship with Hoffman, with John, with Adam and Dr. Gordon, everything that we know thus far. And if they're going to keep all the continuity from Jigsaw, if they're going to keep Logan, Eleanor, and everything related to that, I can see them bringing back Shawnee Smith or Costas Mandalore in order to develop that story even further. Have this relationship show what they knew about each other and really try to build on those characters, that motivation, to the point where if you're going to do a sequel to this 9th film, the 10th film in the franchise, and Tobin Bell, for whatever reason, can't come back, at least you have those characters there, that relationship that you can build on in the future series. That, to me, is the best thing that we can hope for. But let's not go crazy, unless that's the entire purpose, is to go crazy and bring back everyone. Keep it to one person, make the stories worthwhile, and make it count for everyone who's involved and loves these characters. Yes, it's going to be sad to see Costas come back and not Shawnee. It would be sad to see Carrie Ellis come back and not Costas Mandalore and Shawnee Smith. But keep it simple. Tell the story that you want to tell with one character and build it for future sequels, or save those returns for something in the future. That would just be my prerogative. Okay, so before I get into this, really before I do, I want to make it absolutely clear that I do not dislike this character. I don't want this character gone from this sequel or any other future installment for the Saw franchise. I just feel like this character needs a little bit of reinterpreting. And I feel like even using the term character for this thing is not entirely fair, but at the same time, it's been a part of the franchise for the entire series run. So this next film needs to do its best to reinterpret Billy. And I feel like one of the reasons that needs to do that is, even though Billy was scary and it's absolutely horrifying for some people, it's so funny. I have one at my home. This one Christmas, my friend gave it to me for a present, and we used it. We just scared the shit out of my sister. She was terrified, and we would put it all around the house. It was crazy. I'm not going to go into that story, maybe later on live stream or something. But anyway, Billy is terrifying for a lot of people. But it's been around, it's been in the public's consciousness for about 15 years. And yes, getting rid of what's classic, getting rid of what people know or iconic things from franchises can be detrimental, but you don't get rid of him, you reinterpret him, and as you do that, you tell the story behind him. Where did he come from? Tobin Bell has talked about this recently, that he would really like to explore, and he has always said he would very much like to explore the creation or the history behind Billy and the tricycle, and he has ideas that focus on his parents. Delving into that story, going way further back than we've ever gone back in the entire Saw franchise, is something that I, as a fan, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this right now would absolutely adore. It's something that would really make for a very good plot line in a sequel, and that is what we're all hoping for. Maybe reinterpreting Billy, bringing out why he's designed that way in a couple iterations of him sometime in the past or something, playing around with it would really help drive that storyline and allow it to be part of this film. Okay, so the number one thing I want from this new movie is focusing on socially relevant topics. This is one of those things that I've been talking a lot about with my peers on YouTube, my family, my friends. The horror movie genre is in a current state of a golden age, but it's not because, at least in my opinion, it's not because we are getting better horror movies than we've ever gotten. We've always gotten really good horror movies, or at least incredibly fun horror movies that are going to scare people, but would also be a quality film, at least for the genre. Right now, I feel like there's a lot of political and just social unrest of everything going on, and something that helps people deal with that, these unrealized, nothing I can do about them fears about climate, politics, gun violence, all of this other stuff, is boil it down and just allow yourself to sit in a crowded theater in the dark and be afraid for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And at least if you look at some of the movies that have been doing absolutely well at the box office as of late, those movies and their narrative has something to sell to the audience. If you break it down to its absolute basics, you can understand what makes those movies incredibly popular. It is about nostalgia, being a kid, being afraid of clowns, and that's the only thing that you really had to worry about. Was the monster that lived under your bed, or being afraid of the dark, or not really knowing what's around the corner, or what was going on in any other person's day-to-day life. Why do grown-ups act so weird? Why is my town scary? All of that stuff, right? You didn't really have to worry about bills and mortgages and student payment loans and the political unrest, climate change, and all that other stuff. Yes, it's scary, but it reminds you of a more simple time, and one of the reasons people really flock to see that movie. At the same time, you have Jordan Peele making movies like Get Out about racial inequality, and Us about class inequality, and all these other movies that are just killing it at the box office. I'm not saying they're all geared to a socially relevant cause, but at the same time, it doesn't hurt it either. I really feel like bringing in Chris Rock is a really good sign that this next movie is going to be socially relevant. And the Saw franchise really hasn't been overly socially relevant since Saw 6, which a lot of people didn't see, but I feel like that was kind of more unrest and unsatisfaction with Saw 4 and Saw 5, plus the breakout of Paranormal Activity. The whole torture porn thing at that point had really run its course, and nobody was really interested in it. Needless to say, though, Saw 6 is one of the best in the entire franchise, and one of the reasons a lot of people love it, myself included. But it focused on something that was relevant at the time. When that movie came out, we were still fighting about healthcare. Hell, we're still fighting about healthcare right now to this day, and that movie is 10 years old this year. How crazy is that? I think bringing in Chris Rock for this movie, allowing him to tell this story, the more and more I think about it, the only reason I'm becoming more and more excited about it, other than the fact that this is just one of my favorite franchises, I'm doing my best to love and support it and get as many people as excited about it as I am. Bringing in Chris Rock, looking at his past work creatively, both on stand-up tours and just film-related content, like, he has a vision. And he's very socially aware of racial politics and just politics in general. And whether or not you think he can deliver a fine horror movie, I feel like that was his pitch. We need to make this Saw film for the 2020s. We don't need to make this Saw film feel like it's from the early 2000s, during those precious years of post 9/11 depression that the original franchise was bottlenecking, and the horror movies coming out at that time were really trying to capture that we don't know what's going on. Our whole world is breaking apart, and we feel tortured in our day-to-day life. We feel scared just simply getting up out of bed in the morning. And for whatever reason, those first couple Saw films really felt like they were filling the void for the American public at that time. So call them non-political if you want. Say you don't want politics in the Saw films if you want, but that's one of the things that the franchise really encapsulated, and one of the things that made those original films that much more prolific for people, whether you realize it or not. We need to go back to that. We need to give Saw a reason to continue and to exist again. And if that's getting political, if that's getting socially relevant, if that's breaking it down to its bare basics, as I said at the beginning of this entire video, and having two people talk about racial inequality, or having people talk about political unrest, or whatever it might be, that might be worth exploring. That might be compelling. That might be something that everyone flocks to and thinks, wow, this is a Saw film. This is nothing like I anticipated it being. This is nothing like anyone ever told me it was going to be, and I cannot wait for any potential sequel or just the continuation of this franchise in general. Let's celebrate it. Something we thought was dead, something we thought never really amounted to anything in relation to all the other horror movie icons, but has endured this long to give us a movie just like this. That is the one thing I want from this franchise. That's the one thing I really want from this film. And given everything that we know about it thus far, a lot of it, at least from what I've seen, is telling me that that's what we're going to get. I really hope that's the case, but I want to hear everyone's thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section below. What are the things that you want more than anything in this next Saw film? Tell me there. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload. Go down to the description section below, hit that link, and go follow me on Twitter where we can talk about this even more. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. It's been real.